There's a lot of blame being thrown around as fans have been trying to figure out what happened to the Star Wars franchise. Rian Johnson, Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, the Lucasfilm writing group, even the Disney execs like Bob Iger himself. Someone was directly responsible for the decisions that drove many fans away. Let's examine the origins of the sequel trilogy's problems, break down the evidence for who is directly responsible for those problems, and talk about the extremely important life lesson that we can all learn from their mistakes. One of my earliest videos analyzed in depth how if anyone quote-unquote ruined the sequel trilogy, it wasn't Rian Johnson and Episode 8, it was J.J. Abrams with The Force Awakens. If you haven't seen that video yet, I'll leave a link in the description. Star Wars was in trouble the second that The Force Awakens script was finalized, and not just from bad storyline decisions, it was in trouble because the people involved didn't fight for a better story. But there is one crucial element to that story that would ruin everything that came after it. The Force Awakens not only cut Luke completely out of the story, but firmly established Luke Skywalker as a coward and a failure.
He just walked away from everything.
A significant portion of the audience came into the sequel trilogy because they wanted to see Luke and Han and Leia grow up. They wanted to see Luke in his prime as a Jedi Master. Because Luke was the heart of Star Wars. We didn't really expect to see anyone from the prequel trilogy. This was a sequel to the originals, and as such, it needed to fully tie up the character arcs of the original characters. Luke was on the path to be a Jedi Master and start a new Jedi Order. Leia was on the path to be a leader in forming the New Republic. Han and Lando were quickly progressing in the military and would have likely worked closely with Leia, also being leaders in the New Republic. Now, I want to suggest the theory that as much as we love Han, Leia, Lando, and Chewie, that they all could have been extremely minor characters in the sequel trilogy as long as Luke was center stage. Because like I said, for many people he was the heart of the franchise, and these filmmakers decided that that heart needed to be cut out. So, if we accept the premise that ruining Luke's character is one of the biggest factors in ruining the entire franchise, next we have to ask, who is responsible for Luke's downfall? Was it J.J. Abrams setting up the story? Or was it Rian Johnson who didn't properly follow J.J.'s setup? Or was it Kathleen Kennedy who secretly forced them all to tell the story that she wanted to be told? Well, the answer is surprising and contains a vitally important life lesson for all of us. In my previous 2 videos analyzing The Force Awakens, I already detailed all the ways that JJ failed in writing a film that was a natural continuation of Episode 6. And how many of the choices he made were very destructive to the story. He was deeply involved with the writing of the story, and somehow didn't see any of these problems. And even though I don't think this is true, let's assume Kennedy or Iger strong-armed JJ into making certain decisions he didn't agree with. JJ was the name associated with the films. These were his films. He was the director, and the director has the power, at least in the public eye. He could have stood his ground, could have walked away. If JJ was forced into choosing the story that he did, the fault is his, because he gave in to the pressure. But I don't think this is what happened. JJ seems to have been trusted fully with Episode 7. I think every decision he made was what he somehow thought was best for the story. So no, JJ is not the person that I blame for ruining Luke's character. Arndt wasn't known for much before helping write The Force Awakens, but Kasdan was the guy who wrote Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back. How in the world did he go from giving us solid storylines to giving us the ambiguous mess that was Episode 7? It makes me think that these guys didn't have much say in what the story was. They were just tasked with writing the story that JJ and Kathleen decided to tell. And in an interview, we find out one of the main reasons Luke isn't in the film is because they couldn't figure out how to have him next to any of the new characters without him hogging the spotlight, which is basically just publicly admitting that they're terrible writers who created weak characters that can't stand on their own merit. But even considering all of that, it's not the writers that I blame the most for Luke's character. Bob was consulted on whether or not to kill Han, as confirmed in this interview, so he was likely involved enough in the planning to know the story they were going with, and he either thought it was good or didn't care enough to make them change it. So he knew where they were going and didn't see a problem, so we can't really blame him either. Kathleen became president of Lucasfilm in 2012, shortly before it was sold to Disney, so as far as I could tell, she had never been involved creatively in Star Wars before The Force Awakens. Looking at this same article, Bob Iger mentions that it was both Kennedy and Abrams who came to discuss storyline with him, so it appears she had a pretty big role in developing the story, and from what we've seen, her main objective probably wasn't making sure we had a cohesive story. She seems much more interested in sending a message than in the actual story. So yes, she likely did have a lot of influence over the story and Luke's character, but I don't think she's ultimately the culprit. This is a group formed in 2013 that would be responsible for deciding what would be canon storyline in the Star Wars universe. I plan to look in depth at this group in a later video, but suffice to say the entire group has little experience in either writing nor the filmmaking industry. The more you look at their credentials, the more you can tell they never were going to be able to save us from the poor storyline we got. So we couldn't count on any of the filmmakers, writers, nor the Disney execs to fix any bad storyline. Heck, they fired 2 directors mid-film, who then went on to direct an Academy Award-winning film. It's obvious that the execs at Disney have no experience understanding good storytelling in Star Wars, so they were never going to find any issues with Episode 7. These guys were all too new. The fans didn't have anything invested in them, so the actors didn't have much sway over their character. And since The Force Awakens was their first film, they likely weren't yet personally invested in the story itself. So none of these guys would have tried to change Episode 7's story. Although by Episode 8, Daisy was feeling invested in the story, and did feel confident enough to speak up. Look at this interview from The Last Jedi.
When you guys read the script, were there some big surprises in there even for you?
Yeah. I went to Ryan's office and I was like, we need to have a talk about what's happening here.
Daisy openly says she went to Ryan to tell him that she had problems with the story, and nothing happened. She was completely ignored. She may have been one of the main stars, but she still didn't have enough influence to make Ryan change his mind. Harrison Ford didn't care about Star Wars, and we all know it.
When you saw yourself...
No, I argued for 30 years for this to happen.
Right.
And finally, I wore him down.
Heck, he probably even mandated a death scene in his contract to even consider doing Episode 7. He's been begging to be killed off since Empire.
I thought he should have died in the last one.
So there was no way he was ever going to take a stand for good storyline. Now, from everything that I can find, Carrie Fisher had a blast playing Princess Leia. She talks glowingly about all of it, but off the set, It doesn't seem like she cared very much. Carrie loved it while she was there, but from what I can tell, she wasn't very invested in the story or the direction that her character would have taken. So with the entire production team and all the Disney execs being on board with the new story, the only person who could have prevented the terrible storyline we got, the person directly responsible for ruining Luke's character, was Mark Hamill. Because this is the important part. This is the lesson that we all need to learn. Nobody controls you but you. Nobody forced Mark to accept this role. Nobody else moved his hands or made the words come out of his mouth. He dug his own grave, and he knows it.
And I was left with shame and with consequence.
When Mark first read the script, when he saw that Luke runs away and hides after his nephew kills all his other students, that's completely inconsistent with his character. That moment when he first read the script for episode 7 was when Mark Hamill should have seen the problem. Even if none of these other people saw a problem, Mark should have, because Mark was Luke. He was deep into this character and loved him and what he stood for. Having Luke disappear after Ben turns, kills the other students, and burns down the temple, having Luke abandon his sister and his best friend to possibly be killed by their unstable son, that is completely inconsistent with his character. He does not abandon his friends when they're in danger. He does not abandon his family, even when they are evil. Having Luke disappear is completely the opposite of how his character would have reacted, and Mark should have known this. Now, maybe the original script that Mark read was more ambiguous. Maybe all he knew was Luke was away on an island until the very end of the film. Maybe he thought The Force Awakens was setting up Luke for something really special in Episode 8. But then, Mark read the script for The Last Jedi.
I don't know, I felt like I got hit by a truck.
Mark was depressed and bitter for months, especially when the promotional tours began and he had actually seen the final film.
He has lines, so that's already a major difference from Episode 7.
What's the biggest difference from when we last saw Luke in the end of Return of the Jedi to when we meet him now in The Last Jedi?
That's the mystery of the ages. Since it's no longer my story and there's a new protagonist, I had to try and fill in that for myself. It's not important to the story, but it is for the actor to try and figure out, who is this guy? How did the most optimistic, hopeful character in the galaxy turn into this hermit who says it's time for the Jedi to end? I read that and I said, what?
Now Mark eventually gained his composure and backpedaled, trying to be professional and support the film. But for a long time, he was very, very bitter about how Luke was being portrayed.
I'm talking about the George Lucas Star Wars. This is the next generation of Star Wars, so I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker, but I had to do what Ryan wanted me to do because it serves the story well.
Now, I'm not showing these clips trying to attack the sequels. I am showing you these clips so that you can see the shame and regret that Mark is very clearly displaying. Yes, in several interviews, you can see evidence that Mark appeared to be extremely bitter towards Ryan, that he does blame Ryan for this interpretation of Luke. But I think the person that Mark is most angry with is himself. Because he didn't see this coming, because he didn't walk away when he had the chance. Now, many of you are probably saying Mark couldn't have done anything. He doesn't have any real power. And to his credit, he did sort of try.
When I read 8, I told Ryan, I fundamentally disagree with virtually everything you've decided about my character.
But this was not really trying. This was the husband saying he tried to take the trash out, but the front door was locked, so he couldn't. If Mark had tried, and I mean really put his foot down, he could have stopped the entire production in its tracks.
It's like we were drafted. I mean, how am I supposed to say no? I'd be the most hated man on the planet. I mean, there would be fans outside my house like the angry villagers in a Frankenstein picture with lightsabers instead of torches. I'd be the most hated man on the planet.
Think about it. It's 2014. Disney has bought Star Wars. A new film has finally been announced. A director has been chosen. Writers have finished the script. Actors have been cast. The hype is real. All of us lifelong fans are absolutely dying to see a new film after waiting 32 years to find out what our heroes have been up to. And then, Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker himself, posts something shocking across all his social media.
I was recently brought in to discuss the storyline they are planning to pursue for the next Star Wars trilogy and how my character will fit within that story. It is with deep regret that I must announce that I cannot, in good conscience, be involved with these films in any way. I desperately hope that I am wrong, but I have a very, very bad feeling about this.
Now, if Luke Skywalker himself announced to his nearly 1 million Facebook followers, 2.9 million Twitter followers, and 3.3 million Instagram followers that the story was so bad that he couldn't in good conscience be in the films, even with the millions upon millions of dollars Disney would likely offer him, what do you think would have happened? Instant social media meltdown. Fans would have rioted, and Disney would have slammed on the brakes and announced they were rethinking the story from the ground up. And they would have publicly thanked Mark for his bravery and standing up for Star Wars fans everywhere. There is no other course of action Disney would have taken. Only a year ago, they invested $4 billion in Star Wars. The Force Awakens was a crucial beginning to the Disney-Lucasfilm relationship. And if the literal face of the franchise backs out, it would have been a devastating blow. When the first trailer for The Force Awakens dropped, Disney saw its stock immediately double. Now just imagine what would have happened to their stock if Luke Skywalker says the movie is gonna suck and he can't be part of it. Again, many of you are likely saying that Mark doesn't have this kind of power, but consider two things. Number one, the entire story of Star Wars has always revolved around a character training to become a Jedi. Leia didn't have to be the person who started the Resistance. It could have been Akbar or Mon Mothma, or a brand new character. Han didn't have to be in the film at all. As it was, he was just there to give Rey a father figure to progress her plotline, and to die to progress Kylo's plotline. But only Luke could have trained a new generation of Jedi, making Mark Hamill essential to the sequel trilogy's plot before even a word of the script was written. And number two, the biggest reason his voice would have made a difference. Mark Hamill is Luke Skywalker. This isn't Harrison Ford we're talking about here, a guy who borderline hates Star Wars. Mark Hamill absolutely loves being known as Luke Skywalker. He loves his fans, and he loves the Star Wars universe. We, his fans, know this about him. We know how much being Luke Skywalker means to him. So if he had said, "I'm giving up on Star Wars after what I saw Disney is going to do to it," if he had said that, a huge number of us fans would have followed suit. There's no way investors would see Star Wars as anything but a potential liability with a $4 billion unrecoverable investment. their stock would have immediately dropped, and Disney would have quickly issued a press release announcing an immediate halt to production and that they would be talking through a complete rewrite of the script. They would have publicly contacted Mark Hamill to reassure him and his fans about the future of the franchise, and very publicly done everything possible to make sure their stockholders didn't see this $4 billion investment as a liability that should be sold off as soon as possible. I imagine they would have written something like,
"When Luke Skywalker himself tells us we're making a mistake, we listen. We're immediately halting production and rethinking the direction of the story from the ground up."
And since Mark was the focal point of the backlash, he would definitely have been brought in as a consultant to help rewrite the story, because Disney would see how much his opinion matters to the public. And he very likely would have asked that George be brought in as well, because it makes no sense to not have the same mind that created the first 6 also work on the sequels. Now, I acknowledge that if Mark had taken a stand and completely changed the story for Episode 7, that's still no guarantee we would have gotten good films. We still could have gotten something filled with plot holes like hyperspace ramming, Kylo venerating Vader in one film and completely forgetting he existed in the next, the injection of unnecessary comedy, completely uninspiring villains. But my point is, we didn't have to get the terrible story we got. It could have been different. It could have been better. I don't know if Mark could really have made a difference by taking a stand. I don't know if I were in his shoes, if I would have the courage to stand up to Disney, to potentially alienate my vast fan base. And most importantly, I don't know if I would have the strength to walk away from a character that I loved so deeply. And like I said, I blame Episode 7 for creating an unstable foundation for the entire trilogy. That's why I'm focusing on Mark taking action from the beginning. But with Episode 8, what was his excuse? Yes, he tried to warn us, but why didn't he do more? Why didn't he refuse to take part? He knew this character was wrong. Mark knew that the fans would not like it. He knew that he himself hated it. Yet he went along with the story that Ryan wanted. If Mark had refused, just citing publicly that he had creative differences, what do you think would have happened? Would Disney really have sued him for breaking his contract? How would fans have reacted if Disney sued Luke Skywalker for refusing to participate in a film because he felt it wasn't true to his character? Would Ryan have tried to replace Mark, kill Luke off screen, make a CGI version of him? Or would he try to avoid the negative media and change the story to something that Mark approved of? This is what we could have gotten if somebody had really taken a look at how bad the story for Episode 7 was, and had taken a stand to change it. These are all fantastic stories that introduced amazing new characters, with all of these individual stories working in unison to push the franchise towards a bright future. The story JJ went with for The Force Awakens was absolutely terrible, and set up nearly every subsequently terrible plotline that Ryan went with in The Last Jedi. Disney knows the franchise is in trouble. The media knows the franchise is in trouble. The fans definitely know the franchise is in trouble. And there was only one person who saw the failure coming. Only one person who could have prevented it, and he chose not to. The sequel trilogy had a terrible story that ruined Luke Skywalker, and that wasn't the fault of Disney, nor JJ, nor Ryan, nor Kathleen. Luke's character was ruined because Mark Hamill allowed him to be. Friends, this lesson is important. We need to learn from Mark's failure. We control our future. We control our actions. And if we feel a decision is wrong and we go along with it anyway, there is no one to blame but ourselves. One day, your boss, your friend, your SO, someone is going to ask you to do something unethical, something that makes you sick to your stomach to do. The choice is yours. Refuse to compromise on your morals and lose your job, or do the wrong thing and keep your job. Nobody can ever control your actions. They can reward you for compliance, they can punish you for disobedience, but no one can ever control you. You, and you alone, control your destiny.
I feel the conflict within you. Let go of your hate.
Leave this island now!
I'll not leave you here. I've got to save you.
I'm gonna walk out with a laser sword and face down the whole First Order.
I will not turn, and you'll be forced to kill me.
It's time for the Jedi to end.
I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker.
That name no longer has any meaning for me.
It is the name of your true self you've only forgotten. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
I came to this island to die.
Go away!
I can save him. I can turn him back to the good side. I have to try. I feel the conflict within you. Let go of your hate. I'll not leave you here. I've got to save you. I will not turn, and you'll be forced to kill me.
I'm sorry. I was wrong.